doing an environmental justice tour. And now we're visiting with the frontline communities in Appalachia. For more than a century, the families in Appalachia have been at the mercy of extractive industries. The coal industry plays a particularly cruel joke on the residents. After working their whole lives beneath the earth, coal companies repay hardworking American miners by disseminating the land underneath them, promising and then revoking pensions and leaving them to suffer and die, unfortunately, from black lung. All this in the name of making sure that the bottom line is high for that industry. In 2017, I had the opportunity to visit Appalachia myself and see firsthand the coal industry's practices. I saw the rivers running orange with acid mine drainage. I looked over an industrial wasteland where a mountain used to be, and I heard directly from residents of Virginia, West Virginia, Kentucky, and Tennessee about the tragedies that they, their families, and their friends have experienced and continue to experience. Mountaintop removal mining contaminates drinking water, decimates landscapes, causes floods, and causes higher rates of cancer, heart disease, and premature death in the community. Now that the coal industry is facing this steep and ongoing decline, fracked natural gas aims to fill the void left behind. In June 2020, the Trump administration released a report claiming that Appalachia is entering a petrochemical renaissance. But frontline communities have had enough. They want a clean, just, and equitable transition away from fossil fuels. That is why, as I indicated earlier, Representative McEachin, Vice President-elect Kamala Harris, and I introduced the Environmental Justice for All Act. This bill was created through an inclusive, transparent, community-led, and community-driven process. The bill, which would not exist without the consistent engagement of communities in Appalachia. This bill creates a new environmental justice grant program under EPA. It strengthens the Civil Rights Act of 1964 by allowing residents to seek justice through their Title VI rights. It strengthens the National Environmental Policy Act by extending public commenting period. It creates an assistance fund for fair and just transition. And most importantly, it requires the consideration of cumulative effect and impacts in permitting decisions under the Clean Water Act and the Clean Air Act. Today, we're going to hear directly from community organizers from Appalachia. They will share with us the many challenges the community face. We will learn how the passage of the Environmental Justice for All Act will give them the tools to combat polluters. Now, let me take time to introduce the esteemed panelists that have joined us today. Julie Bledsoe is a proud statewide organizer for community empowerment. Julie's husband, Ron Bledsoe, contracted cardiopulmonary disease after working to clean up the TVK Kingstone coal ash spill. Julie is speaking out against the health risks associated with coal ash and is currently fighting the construction of a coal ash landfill in the unincorporated Claxton County in Tennessee. Alex Cole, our next panelist, is a community organizer for Ohio Valley Environmental Coalition. Alex has a BS in environmental geography, a BA in United States history. I'm a history major too, just as a side note. He earned both in just 4 years from Ohio University. Alex's grassroots organizing work is now focused on stopping the proposed Appalachian Storage Hub petrochemical complex, ASH, proposed for the Appalachian region. And the other person that we are happy to have join us today is Gabby Gillespie, is a community organizer for the Southern Appalachian Mountain Stewards and Sierra Club in Virginia. Her research interests include mapping, participatory ethnography, and Central and Southern Appalachia. Gabby has dedicated her life to ensure all communities of Appalachia have a clean and just transition. Thank you very much for being with us. Let me now, if he has joined us, my colleagues, Congressman Cartwright and Congressman Lowenthal, the subcommittee chair of the mining subcommittee. I don't know if they've joined us at this point. If they have, Mr. Cartwright, if there's any comments or opening comments you would like to make before we go to the panelists, the time is yours, sir.
Chairman, Rep. Cartwright has not joined us yet, but Chair Alan Lowenthal has.
Okay, Chairman Lowenthal, opening comments, if you would, please. Time is yours.
May I have a drink of that water?
Now, I believe now I'm unmuted.
I can hear you.
Right,
I
you
can
can
hear
hear
you,
me
sir.
now? All right. First, I want to thank you, Chair Grijalva and Representative McEachin for your tremendous work and leadership on the Environmental Justice for All Act and for holding these community forums, which I have found to be engaging, enlightening, and I really want to thank you for inviting me to participate once again in today's forum. I'm just going to talk about three things. One is the health and the relationship to mountaintop removal mining. You know, we all know that coal mining can be extremely dangerous for miners, but we also know, though we may understand it not as well, that coal mining is also harmful for the communities living nearby. This is particularly the case for extractive strip mining, like mountaintop removal. In 2016, at the urging of the Appalachian communities, the Department of Interior funded the National Academy of Sciences to study this very issue. But halfway through the study, before they could complete the study, the Trump administration canceled that study. I've been working with the chair, Chairman Grijalva, and our colleagues in trying to understand why did they do this. To the best of my understanding, the only reason they did this was because the coal industry asked them to do it. Under a new Biden administration, we must restart this study and ensure that appropriate air and water regulations are updated to protect impacted communities. What about a just and meaningful transition? What does that mean? There is no doubt that a transition away from fossil fuels to zero emission energy sources is essential if we will leave a recognizable world for our grandchildren and our great-grandchildren and beyond. I believe we can push for a zero carbon energy future and at the same time have great economic growth. But we must prepare for such a transition, however, and in the case of coal in Appalachia, automation and cheaper natural gas has already put thousands of coal miners out of work. The solution is to provide new opportunities for workers and new options for towns to grow and thrive. As we make this necessary transition to clean energy, other regions and other workers will face some of the same challenges. We simply cannot sit back and watch this occur. We must take actions to ensure that people and communities are not left behind. And finally, I want to talk about Representative Cartwright's bill. As chair of the Natural Resources, Energy and Minerals Subcommittee, I was able to preside over hearings regarding important legislation introduced by my friend and colleague, Representative Matt Cartwright, including but not limited to the Surface Mining Control and Reclamation Act amendments and the Reclaim Act. The Surface Mining Control and Reclamation Act amendments reauthorize the Abandoned Mine, the AML, Trust Fund, which restores mining sites to ensure that they no longer create a health or environmental hazard to the communities, as well as creating jobs. But the Reclaim Act puts to use $1 billion in unappropriate funds, which will give the states that much needed investment to help deeply impacted communities who have seen the loss of these jobs. These are important bills that will help our communities create the job, go through this transition while cleaning mines. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for letting me say something.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'm glad you brought those two pieces of legislation up. They're vital, they're important, and they're part of a transition package that is essential going forward. Thank you. Is Mr. Cartwright joined us yet, or?
Yes, I have, Mr. Chairman. How are you this afternoon?
Good. The floor is yours, sir.
Well,
Opening comments.
I appreciate the comments of my brother Alan Lowenthal, and I want to weigh in on this subject. You know, it's well established that communities of color and low-income communities face disproportionate harm from climate change and environmental contamination. And as Alan pointed out so eloquently, that is no different for coal country. In my district in northeastern Pennsylvania, these same communities have been especially vulnerable to COVID-19. My fellow Democratic colleagues and I have continued to fight for additional funds to address the needs of these communities throughout the pandemic. But our fight for environmental justice didn't just start with the pandemic and certainly will not end with it. We have seen the harms caused by environmental injustice for decades in my home state. Scattered throughout northeastern Pennsylvania are the very abandoned coal mines that Congressman Lowenthal was talking about. They remind us of the days when coal was king of our domestic energy production. Scranton, Pennsylvania used to be the Houston, Texas of America. And what has been left behind are abandoned mine lands. These days, these abandoned mine lands pose significant health and environmental hazards, including acid mine drainage. You know, you fly over parts of my district, you can see the orange plumes in the water. And you know that these are oxidized metals coming out of abandoned mines and into the water courses. These impacts affect people's health, their daily lives. They hold back economic development in these communities. And again, one of the great bipartisan success stories here is the creation of the Abandoned Mine Lands Trust Fund. It's a fund that collects fees paid by present-day operating mining companies, which local communities use to reclaim and repurpose abandoned mines. It spurs long-term, locally driven economic development opportunities. More than 800,000 acres of damaged land and water have been restored since the creation of this program. But our work is far from over, and unfortunately, the AML fund is set to expire in September of 2021. That's why we have this bill that would reauthorize the fund for an additional 15 years. It was passed by the House in July, but was not received well in the Senate. It hasn't received any Senate consideration at all. So I'm thankful for Chairman Grijalva's longstanding leadership on this issue, and I'm so glad that the virtual Environmental Justice Now tour has come to the Appalachian region. I remain hopeful that Congress can come together and pass bipartisan COVID-19 relief legislation that includes assistance to all Americans, including our environmental justice communities, as well as reauthorizing the AML Trust Fund early next year. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you very much, Congressman. And let me now turn to Judy Bledsoe, statewide organizing for community empowerment. 5 minutes. Any written or additional material that you provide the committee will also be part of the record of the forum. With that, let me turn it over to you, Julie.
Hello, thank you for having me. I live in Knoxville, Tennessee, and 12 years ago now, my husband was called to respond to the Kingston coal ash spill. He went along with lots of people from our community. When they got there, it was like a moonscape. All you could see as far as you could see was spilled coal ash. He and his co-workers went to work immediately, and he worked there for 4 years. And during this time, he was exposed to great amounts of toxic coal ash. The engineering firm in charge of the cleanup, Jacobs Engineering, did not provide them with respiratory protection. They asked about it and they told them they were safe. This coal ash is safe enough to eat. It's like dirt. if you're having any kind of issues. It's just the pollen in the area. They were not respected, even when they brought up, letters from doctors and said, my doctor says I need to wear a mask. They were shown to the gate. It was an atrocity that happened to these people. So now it's 12 years later, and we have over 50 dead workers from Kingston. My husband was a lifetime non-smoker. Most of his life, he worked in the film industry and production support all across this country. He's worked with a lot of very famous people. He's represented his state professionally. He worked in Pennsylvania, coordinator there. So anyway, back to his time at Kingston. He now has COPD. He's on oxygen at night. He has gone a solid, years not being able to lay down flat in bed and sleep at night. Now he is suffering with some voice issues with his vocal, and he's in therapy for that. He loves to play the guitar and sing. He can no longer sing. By the end of the day, he can barely talk. His voice is just worn out. So we're going on to more specialists. Also, the neglect and the crimes that were committed did not stop there. People have been sickened. They have been denied any kind of help. The community here, we have people who have, tried to help, but as far as TVA or Jacobs, for a lot of these people, they were uninsured, unable to get medicine. One of the inhalers my husband has every day to keep him breathing is $400 a month. I work and provide insurance, so that it has been that way for a long time. So my husband's doing fairly well. Those that could not get insurance and get help, a lot of them have died. We have people suffering greatly that need help. These people fell through the loopholes. A lot of these contractors, they know how to cut expenses and what they can get by with, and they have great minds working to help them take advantage. One more thing I'd like to add is that this coal ash was actually taken to a poor Black community in Alabama. They don't have any hills or mountains there, but they do have a coal ash mountain there now. These people don't even have a library in their community or a swimming pool for the kids, but they have a coal ash mountain. And now many of their people are getting sick. When coal is burned, and we put scrubbers in most of the stacks to clean the coal ash from going into and the chemicals from going into the air, that stays in the coal ash. So the main thing I want to say real quick is that we have coal ash ponds all over the United States leaching these chemicals into our groundwater. In the state of Tennessee, we have 2 large coal ash ponds, or we should call these lakes, because they take up acres and acres of land, and that ash mixed with water. And we need worker protection for the people that are going to be cleaning these future coal ash ponds. At this time, these people will be falling through the cracks. They will not be protected. I don't want this to happen to anyone else. We need proper storage of coal ash. It's here. It's not going to go away. It cannot be stored near people or water. It must be in lined pits, high and dry, and completely lined. It's a terrible thing that we have to deal with this, but we must deal with the coal ash responsibly. These people that were sickened at Kingston, this should never, ever happen again. Workers that work in coal ash need full face respiratory protection. They also need tieback suits. The heavy metals fall on their skin, embed in their skin, and cause sores and lesions and cancers. Also, some of the coal ash contains radium. So that's my 5 minutes. I could talk an hour.
Thank you very much, Julie. Let me now ask another panelist, Mr. Alex Cole from the Ohio Valley Environmental Coalition. 5 minutes of yours, sir.
Yeah, thank you, Julie, for that harrowing story, a very important one, and thank everybody who organized this for their time and effort. When I was asked to tell my story about environmental justice where I live in the Kanawha Valley, I just didn't even know where to start. I'm from Mason County, West Virginia, which is where the Kanawha River meets the Ohio River, former Shawnee territory. From the top of my hill on our family farm, you can see 5 coal burning power plants, each one of them with a pond or a mountain of fly ash next to it, just like Julie described before. So coal is a big part of the history here, and particularly coal burning for power. We've powered the Midwest and the Mid-Atlantic of this country for a long time now. You couldn't really tell it by looking around and seeing if, you know, we got any wealth in return. The whole southern part of the Kanawha River watershed, it might as well just be one big strip mine at this point. You know, Boone County, McDowell County, Mingo County, some of the places that have gained national recognition, you know, as mountaintop removal sacrificial zones are well within the Kanawha watershed. But I want to illuminate a little lesser known history of this region. The Kanawha River Valley is also known as Chemical Valley because Union Carbide got their start here in the late 1890s, and even the chemical industry predates that because of the salt and the coal and the natural gas, the rich natural resources of these mountains that, and you know, we've been cursed with in many ways. I grew up listening to stories of my mother. She used to play on the riverbank behind our general store that my family ran in Fraser's Bottom, West Virginia for 2 generations. She used to bury the dead fish in the river. This is back in the 60s. She'd go down and there'd be dead fish at fish kill, and they'd be up on the riverbank, and she'd bury them in a little cemetery, making, you know, little crosses for all the dead fish lined up. For fun, you know, what do you do? And also so she didn't have to smell dead fish in her backyard for the rest of the week. Also stories from a local family friend who was in his 60s when I was a young man. And he talked about going down to the river to fish to get dinner, that they grew up very poor, and, you know, went down to the river to catch some catfish. And there was the biggest catfish he ever saw flopping around in the mud on the riverbank. And he just didn't understand, and he tried, you know, he thought it was sick or something, and he tried to put it in the water and you know, help it, and it swam back up on the riverbank and out of the water. That's how toxic this water was before, you know, regulations, Clean Water Act and what have you in that era. The Kanawha River sediment is full of PCBs and dioxin to the point where none of the municipalities on the river can get water from the Kanawha River, and the capital of Charleston is on this river. It's the largest river continuously in the state of West Virginia. Monsanto and FMC and Union Carbide, Dow, Bayer, Crop Sciences, they all have facilities on this river, including one in particular right next to the historically Black college, the only one in the state. And the entire college campus, deep water and shallow groundwater and surface soil, is contaminated from fallout from this chemical plant that was built on land stolen from the freed slaves that built the towns around there and the college, you know. So just history, generational history of contamination and devastation and taking advantage of poor people. And, you know, like I said, it often gets overshadowed. It's a history that just is not known and not taught for very specific reasons. But now our politicians and industrial leaders want to build a petrochemical renaissance on top of this, expanding all these chemical plants, building new chemical plants, taking advantage of the dearth of natural gas, or the excess of natural gas that's been drilled in the Marcellus and Utica shales. They want to build right on top of this. And ironically enough, you know, I was up late last night because one of these chemical plants exploded just last night. It's a constant, you know, there's my alarm, but it's a constant. I grew up doing shelters in places. This facility makes rat poison, and it's in the poor community of Bell, and they had a 2-mile radius shelter in place. And, you know, the only way we as people who live here can deal with this is, you know, fatalistic humor a lot of the time. And one of my friends that lives in Rand right next door was in the shelter in place radius, and we were texting last night trying to figure out what happened. And he said, yeah, they just make a shelter in place so they know where to find our bodies. And I've heard that before. Like that's what we're dealing with here. That I've already gone over time, so I cede the floor. But thank you all for your time.
Thank you very much. And our final panelist, Gabby Gillespie, Southern Appalachian Mountain Stewards and Sierra Club organizer in Virginia. Good to see you again. Time is yours.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you all so much for having us here and bearing witness to our experiences of living in environmental justice communities in Appalachia and our struggles advocating and organizing for our lives and our livelihoods. I'm so grateful for the EJ for All Act and the model that it's creating for legislation built from the ground up and from people most impacted like we are. I'm especially grateful for the leadership of Chairman Grijalva, who came to visit us in Big Stone Gap a few years ago to see directly what we're facing with the impacts of mountaintop removal, and Representative McEachin, who's represented Virginia very well. I'm also here representing Virginia today. My name's Gabby Gillespie. I was born and raised in Southwestern Virginia, the unceded land of the Cherokee and Shawnee people. And I've made a home in Wise County as a member of Southern Appalachian Mountain Stewards. Our president, Taisha Devon, has played a really important role in representing EJ communities in the creation of the EJ for All Act and as a member of Virginia's Council on Environmental Justice. So I'm super proud of her, and she's kind of the one that brought me into this space today. And SAM, Southern Appalachian Mountain Stewards, we call it SAMS, began as an organization in a time of crisis in our community after a 3-year-old boy was crushed by a 1,000-pound boulder that was dislodged from a strip mine road above his family's home in Inman Holler. This tragedy deeply changed the landscape of the fight for environmental justice in Appalachia and was one of many of incidents of gross negligence on the part of the coal industry that continues to make it clear that we're expected to be a sacrifice zone in the production of fossil fuels. And we're facing yet another crisis in our communities as we see an epidemic of Black lung disease that has risen to historically unprecedented levels. We're seeing more and more of our people getting this disease, and younger miners are being impacted. I've seen folks in my community or nearby in Kentucky as young as in their 20s that are suffering from complicated Black lung. And with the continued rise of the global pandemic and their impacts on the respiratory system, we're at even more risk in mining communities from dying of COVID-19. As the coal industry continues to decline, we're also experiencing an economic crisis. We've always lived with the boom and bust here in Appalachia, but this has only gotten worse as we face the recent bankruptcies. The companies who have not gone bankrupt are ceasing production as well as reclamation, which leaves us wondering who will be left with this cleanup. As a young person growing up in Appalachia, it's not always been easy to stay when facing the struggles that we do. I've been blessed enough to find an amazing community with Southern Appalachian Mountain Stewards and the Stay Together Appalachian Youth Project and the Alliance for Appalachia and so many more organizations that you see represented here. I've also been really grateful to find employment with the Sierra Club after years of doing volunteer work, where I now get paid to organize, and I've been supported in my leadership. Many Appalachian people have only been offered false solutions like prisons, or as Alex uplifted, just the continued reliance on fossil fuel industry as our solutions for a just transition in Appalachia. These false solutions aren't going to get us anywhere, and without legislation like the EJ for All Act and even more action on the part of regulatory agencies and the coal companies themselves, I worry about our futures here in Appalachia. We're currently looking at hundreds of what we call functionally abandoned permits. Representative Cartwright spoke to abandoned mine lands. So these are pre-law, pre-SMACRA abandoned mine lands, but what we're dealing with here are functional abandoned permits in our communities where coal removal has stopped and reclamation is incomplete. Many of these companies don't have the money to cover cleanup, but we know they have more money right now than they ever will with the coal economy on a steady downward trajectory. So we need action now and a plan for cleanup and the continued monitoring of these sites. The system that was set up for us, bonding of these permits, is clearly failing. For those of us in communities with a bond pool, it's clear that the cost of reclamation is way higher than the money that's left in this pool. In Virginia, we were lucky enough that we had legislation passed to end the bond pool, but unfortunately the permits that existed in the bond pool were grandfathered in. So we are still seeing the impacts of that deficit. So what we know is that we need a solution that will cover the cost of this legacy pollution after coal companies have left us behind. We've sacrificed our lives, our health, our land, and our livelihoods to keep the lights on in this country. And it leads me to ask, what else are we expected to sacrifice? Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. All three of you, we appreciate it very much. Let me turn to my colleagues that have joined us and ask Chairman Lowenthal for questions, comments. 5 minutes are yours, sir.
Well, you know, the exploitation of these communities, it's just staggering. It just takes my heart away. How, whether it's petrochemical that Mr. Cole mentioned, or Gabby Gillespie's talking about these mining that was not the mining companies did not provide any kind of sufficient bonding, or they've gone into bankruptcy, they've walked away. I'm just shocked. It's just horrible. It's just a dumping ground. And it's just so sad, the destruction of the planet. And we do have a responsibility. So I'm just going to ask everyone on this panel, as I mentioned when I first began, that in 2016, the National Academy of Sciences in President Obama's administration was commissioned to measure these health impacts of mining in Appalachia, but that was gotten rid of by President Trump's Department of Interior under President Trump. Were you aware that finally the government was trying to study these issues and to work on it, and that the present administration under the Department of Interior just stopped the study halfway through? So I wanted to ask any of the folks who've spoken.
Yes, I knew. I learned. I've been reading, and I was very disappointed.
Thank you. Mr. Cole, were you aware that finally there was going to be a study of some of these health impacts that you live with?
Yes. Sorry. Yes, and that was solely due to OVEC, where I work now, but I didn't work there at the time. They've been very on top of this and educating people to that effect.
How are we going to educate, maybe to Ms. Gillespie, how are we going to educate others about this crisis in Appalachia? That what we do now in Appalachia is going to be the model for what we do in oil and gas in other parts of the country. Appalachia is really 20 or 30 years ahead of many of the other places. So what message can you tell us that we need to do in terms of the transition that we're not only going to see in Appalachia, we're going to see in southern Louisiana, we're going to see in parts of Texas and Oklahoma, offshore oil and gas drilling, because those communities are totally dependent And yet they also go through this exploitation. And, they kind of sold their souls for a few dollars at this moment. And the same issues. Once these companies go bankrupt, there's not going to be money there either. And so what message can you say, because what we do in Appalachia is going to be the model now. We're either going to do this in terms of the transition off and protect those communities and provide them the resources to move in other directions, to protect the earth, to protect the environment, or we're going to abandon not only Appalachia, we're going to abandon lots of parts of this country. So I'm wondering, what are your thoughts to tell, your message to the rest of the, to the country? I don't think most people understand the health.
Yeah, and I want to speak a little bit to your former question as well. We've been doing grassroots health studies from real doctors, real scientists for a very long time. And these health studies are available, but aren't uplifted or acknowledged in the way that the study you mentioned maybe would have been, but also maybe if it went through, it wouldn't have been either. What we need is continued funding for these kinds of health studies, and not only for the impacts of mining, but, what Julie lifted up, what Alex lifted up, these petrocoal, the coal ash, all these things, black lung. We need a lot of research. We need more funding. There's plenty of fundraising and scrounging around for money that we've been doing to get these studies done for a long time. But what we need is greater funding for this, but also to speak to your second question, we need funding and support for a just transition. And we're not just an example of what happens in coal mining communities. I live in southwestern Virginia, where also the Mountain Valley Pipeline is proposed. Luckily, we've heard this year, in such a challenging year of 2020, we did get some good news that they weren't moving forward with the Atlantic Coast Pipeline, but we are still fighting the Mountain Valley Pipeline, offshore drilling out near Virginia Beach and other parts of Virginia. We're seeing the impacts of so many pieces of the fossil fuel industry, and as we are a model for what it looks like to see the harm, we also hope to be a model of what it truly looks like to have a just transition, which means including the stories and the ideas and the innovation from the ground. We have plenty of brilliant people in our area that have many ideas for what this could look like, for how we could clean up in a way that also provides jobs. And if we're going to be the innovators of the fossil fuel industry, then hopefully we can be the innovators of the renewable energy sector as well. We're happy to continue to keep the lights on, but we'll need a lot of investment. And you see so many industries being subsidized, and it's time to subsidize those of us who have continued to sacrifice for so many years.
Thank you, and I yield back, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Cartwright, 5 minutes, questions to the panelists, comments, sir?
Thank you, Chairman. And thanks again for organizing this. This is so important because it goes beyond, I've been squawking a lot about coal country, and I do that because those are the people that I represent. But, when we talk about the Environmental Justice for All Act, it's a lot more than just about coal country. It's about disadvantaged people all over the United States who are poor, who are people of color, who are at bottom. They're people that don't have the kind of influence that they need to prevent environmental injustice from occurring in their neighborhoods. And so we have stories from Alex Cole and Gabby Gillespie and Ms. Bledsoe. And Ms. Bledsoe, I wanted to ask you, one of the things that the Environmental Justice for All Act does is it creates legal remedies. And that's so important. It's no good just enacting a statement of principles, right? You have to have something with teeth. And teeth comes with access to courts and lawyers with briefcases and people sticking up for American rights. That's what this does. It creates some American rights. And I wanted to ask you, you told a horrendous story about your husband and the injustice visited upon him. And are there court cases involved in your husband's story?
Yes, sir. There's been a two-part tort court cases with Jacobs Engineering. They were the contractor put in charge of the cleanup by the Tennessee Valley Authority. So we basically won the first part. So now each worker has to go to court and prove that their illnesses were caused by the neglect that Jacobs inflicted upon this large group of people. There are lots of loopholes that need to be sewed up tight. I mean, these companies know they did break the law, and they were very, very bold in breaking the laws that they broke. So there's layers and layers and layers of unjust lies and misrepresentations. When my husband first came home and told me they would not allow me to wear a dust mask, I said, well, honey, PDAC's there, OSHA's there, TOSHA's there, TVA's there. If they tell you you don't need a dust mask, you must not need one. That's how naive I was. So, now I have to live with that. And that's one of the reasons I fought so hard. I wished I had said, well, leave that job now. Don't go back another day. We were so blind. We believed what we were being told. And that is what we cannot do. Coal ash is toxic. When it's burned, the back constituents in it are concentrated. People cannot breathe it. If the particles are smaller than 2.5, the particulate matter, it cannot be coughed out of the lungs. It enters the bloodstream, and it this disease different ways and different people plays upon their vulnerabilities in their bodies.
Well, that's what you do is when something like this has happened, it's a historical fact. It's something that has occurred in the past. And the only thing you can try to do is go to court and seek justice. Sometimes that works. Sometimes you'll have a solvent wrongdoer still around to make recompense. And I hope that works out for your husband and your family, Julie. But a lot of times it doesn't. And that's why we talk about things like the Reclaim Act and SMACRA and making sure that there is money there to fix problems. But the Environmental Justice Act for All Act, this takes it a step further. This talks about future impacts of environmental injustice. It talks about making federal agencies like some of the ones you just mentioned and others take into account what could happen in neighborhoods if this project is approved, if this new coal plant is approved, all of the things that we've been talking about. So that's one thing that I like about it is it creates a right of action for people in neighborhoods to go to court to prevent the kinds of things that have been visited upon your family, Ms. Bledsoe. And that's why I'm a very proud co-sponsor of this. And I thank Chairman Grijalva for introducing this important act. It's no wonder he's already garnered 74 co-sponsors in the House, and I expect the movement to keep growing. Chairman Grijalva, I yield back.
Can I make
Thank
a
you.
quick suggestion? I'm sorry to interrupt.
Please.
When you get back to the House, let Mr. Tim Burchett know you talked with me. I begged him to do something. I would love to see him join your efforts.
Will do.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let me just a couple of quick questions. Going back, I think Mr. Cartwright made Mr. Lowenthal made a good point about that the model that the region that we're talking about today, Appalachia, can become in terms of being the canary in the cage in many instances, both good and bad. This is an opportunity in a good sense to begin to as we talk about reclamation and restoration, that become part of the discussion and transition, both on the employment side and on the environmental side. Reactions from Gabby, Alex, in terms of that being part, a win-win, that being part of what we do in terms of economic development and employment in the region. How do you see that?
Yeah, I have sorry, Gabby, if I can go first to mention. It's a shame we are ahead of the curve on the bad things. We definitely are a harbinger of what can go wrong, unfortunately, especially in the political sense of just
Yes.
corruption and being. I have a passion for mine reclamation and have worked in it before and have experience in that, but recently transitioned to this fight against ash in a big way, because I've sat and listened to politicians and policymakers talk about this. How are we as taxpayers going to clean up all this stuff? And I'm watching them, and the next day at a different press conference promoting the Appalachian storage hub and actually pumping resources into that.
Yes.
In billions of dollars terms. So I've often said the first step is to stop digging the hole. We have to break this chain, this cycle of building worse on top of worse on top of worse. That's the first step. And to Gabby's earlier point, I believe there's all kinds of creative, highly intelligent, crazy, amazing people here, just with the skills, with the know-how, knowing how things work, can create anything, take nothing and build something out of it. So we have to listen to the people on the ground, and we have to respect them, and we have to stop digging the hole. I'll cede the floor.
Yeah, I mentioned in my testimony that it's not always been easy to stay home, stay in Appalachia. We have such love for our people. We have such love for the land, and we know it. I was lucky enough to be brought up by herbalists and healers. And, I know so many plants in the woods. I know how to heal, with COVID. I did get COVID, and I actually got through it by using herbs and plants from my own herbal knowledge, like elderberries that grow right around me. So not only do we have this innovation but this ancestral knowledge of how to live in our own home. And it's unfortunate that so many plants and so many trees and so much land has been harmed and destroyed, but we still have so much to learn from it. So, the biggest thing to me is that these solutions are rooted in our knowledge. We get a lot of ideas coming down to us, like Alex mentioned when we were meeting before, that people will build these big projects of like big greenhouses and all these things on top of old strip mines. And I think in the same ways that it's important for us to have the EJ for All Act in order to, make decisions for how the fossil fuel industry is functioning in our homes and in our environment. I think also having that same participation when creating the solutions, because I know that some of the pilot money that we've seen come down has been used to create water lines for prisons and things like that. And I know there was huge outcry when that came down. And SMACRA itself was created by the people from outcry for the fact that we didn't have laws to govern strip mining. And now, unfortunately, SMACRA that was built successfully was built for a functioning coal industry and coal economy, but it wasn't built for what we're dealing with right now with bankruptcies. So we need more rules and laws that are built by the people and informed by the people.
Thank you. Maybe for all three of you, and then we'll kind of wrap. And your point is well taken, that you know, every region is different. We have serious issues with reclamation in the West, in New Mexico, Arizona, and Nevada, and primarily in terms of abandoned mines and the consequences that they're causing, both environmentally and in terms of just the physical danger that they pose, and that cost is huge to reclaim them. And those have all been abandoned. Companies have gone bankrupt, and with the appearance, and more so every day, of multinational mining companies, multinational extraction industry companies, it's even harder to get the kinds of financial security commitments for the long haul. And you're right, those laws have to be updated. But the issue is that as we go forward with the environmental justice issue, as we go forward, as Mr. Cartwright and Mr. Lowenthal both pointed out, the urgency of the moment, we're going to get some serious pushback. I mean, the industry will not go quietly into the night as we propose this. And so a certain amount of continued organizing and advocacy is going to be critical going forward. What we do on the outside of Congress to make this a centerpiece of our response, not only to the public health crisis of the pandemic, which is affecting people who have higher exposure worse, and making an already a disparate system is being shown to be more disparate. And you have that, and you have the need to deal with the very real issue of climate change and how we come to grips with that, and how we begin to reduce our negative contribution to that warming. And so all these things we're going to get pushback on. We're going to get pushback on two particularly important issues. Mr. Cartwright brought one of them up as having to do with the ability for communities to redress their grievance and to seek enforcement, and that is the court portion of it. That's part of this law. And the other one is cumulative effects. That it's not just this one mine or this one dump of coal ash. It's the cumulative effect that has happened in the region to affect the public health and the environmental concerns around clean air and clean water, et cetera. Those are the two that we're going to get the most resistance on. And I wanted to ask you to tell, from your perspective, why those have to still continue to be front and center in this discussion. We'll start with you, Gabby, and any other panelists want to chime in, that would be good.
I see Alex raring to go. So
Okay, well, Alex, please.
go for it.
No, just in reference to the cumulative effects, to show the importance of that, one of the first permits I dealt with, cutting my teeth in doing all this, was for a fractionation facility, which is more or less a natural gas refinery, big distillation process, highly explosive, super dangerous, crazy toxic. They built it in 3 stages. So the DEP gave it 3 separate permits that were all, that's the Department of Environmental Protection in West Virginia. They permitted it in 3 stages separately as 3 minor source polluters. If they had done it all together as one, it would have been a major source and the EPA would have had to step in, but it's literally the same facility, the same company, inside the same fence. Anybody walking up to it will tell you that's one facility, but that's the importance of this. And they all 3 got permitted, and we weren't allowed to comment on the cumulative effects at the hearing. And it's next to 5 other chemical plants, by the way, but
Thank you.
That's it.
Yeah, in Wise County, where I live in Virginia, we have orphan gas wells from 70s, 80s, 90s that we're still dealing with. We have a coal burning power plant in St. Paul, the Virginia City hybrid plant, as well as mountaintop removal, underground mining, and of course, as Julie has lifted up, all the waste from all of that. And so black lung is a huge issue that we're dealing with, but folks who live underneath of those strip mines are probably seeing similar respiratory issues as well. And I think the biggest thing is that a lot of people don't even think about is the psychological effects of seeing this devastation in these places that we love so much. The stories from our memas and papas and other folks of what it used to be like. I think that is a long-term healing journey that we truly need.
That's a good point.
Yeah, and our economy is, like I said, has always functioned on this boom and bust. So, coming to a stabilization is going to take a long time, and the health impacts of living in that kind of economic system with this monolith of coal, and how we move and get all the innovation that we spoke about, get the wheels turning on a new economy. All of this is lifelong, and I hope I see it in my lifetime. And I think we got a lot of work to do, but we have a lot of heart, and we have a lot of brains to put to good use. So.
Well said. Julie, do you want any comments?
Well, the one thing that surprised me was I didn't know a thing about coal ash. And most people don't know anything about coal ash. And it's one of the largest waste produced in this country. People don't understand what coal ash ponds are. They don't understand that there are these huge lakes. I know the cigarette industry, lied to our people for years and told us tobacco was safe. And schools started educating children about the dangers of nicotine, years before it got into court. So this is something that's culturally wrong in our country. We are a trusting people. We do not understand just because a company brings you a job, they may bring you an incurable disease. Maybe you live next to a coal-fired plant and your grandfather died of lung cancer and your grandmother had lung cancer. Now you're wheezing. Maybe it's that coal ash blowing in the air. I mean, we have people that have grown up in these communities and they've just sort of been grandfathered in. They don't understand what they're being exposed to. So I think it needs to start with children, educating them, somehow without scaring everybody to death. But, I was shocked when my husband came home and said, they won't let me wear an air mask. They're saying we don't need a dust mask. And I thought, well, that's impossible in the United States of America. That doesn't happen. And, for a solid year, I woke up every night thinking, how did this happen to the man that I love? How did this happen to all these people in the United States of America? How did this happen? And I was so shocked and so disillusioned. I just couldn't believe it. And, we watched the pharmaceutical companies spread opioids all over this nation. And the leading cause of death is opioid overdose instead of car accidents. But we've seen what happened. We've seen that company come to court, and we've seen what's happened. We've made it. I mean, they are. Is it the Sackler family? We've watched also the nicotine companies. Now it's not, there's not an easy solution, but it's like making a pot of soup. There's a lot of ingredients that are going to go into this solution, a lot of ingredients. And it's going to take education and educating people and not sweeping it under the rug. Maybe we all need to do op-eds, write in articles and educate our communities. The people here in Tennessee, they vote for the leaders that fight these bills. Sadly, they don't understand that they're hurting themselves. They just don't understand.
Thank you. And I want to thank all the panelists and my two colleagues, thank you very much. This forum has added immensely to all the forums and to the motivation on the part of myself and the colleagues that have joined us today, and many others to, as you use the analogy of the stew, you know, our job as we see it is to make sure that the water starts boiling, and so we can start putting those things in there. And that's our job. And I think the Environmental Justice for All Act gives us that opportunity to start that boil. And so look forward to working with you and asking for your help in making sure that Environmental Justice for All Act plus the initiatives that have to be done administratively go forward. And we're going to need your help on that, and we'll be calling on you. With that, let me thank you all and adjourn the forum. Appreciate it.